Iron Man 3, in terms of the plot, which Gwyneth Paltrow said she didn't really understand. I mean, the plot, just to recap, is essentially that Tony Stark, after all that Avengers and the Vortex business, is having bad dreams, and he's sort of trying to come to terms, which is kind of unsurprising when you consider what happened the last time we saw him. So there is the Mandarin, who is out there doing bad stuff. He goes on national television and says to the Mandarin, "Oi, come here and say that. Here's my address." Next thing you know, massive, great helicopters do come here and oi say that. He is then cast out into the wastelands where he doesn't have his suit anymore, and he's having to sort of rebuild himself, and he makes friendship with this young kid.
Had the Mandarin been interviewed in The Independent and he'd sort of threatened violence in an article,
he would have gone, "It's terrible, that Tony Stark. He came on and said all these bad things about me. I don't think it's fair."
Sorry.
Oh,
I apologise.
Then there's the ongoing confrontation with the Mandarin. Meanwhile, obviously, he's worried about Pepper Potts' welfare, and he's been working on these suits which respond to his commands, but are also apparently able to work on their own. So that's essentially the plot synopsis. Then we have Guy Pearce, who is somebody who he snubbed some time ago. He's a boffin who was snubbed years and years ago. And then we have Rebecca Hall as somebody with whom he had a brief dalliance, but is an incredibly sort of clever son. All these threads are drawn together. I mean, the plot isn't enormously complicated. No. And then the last half hour of it is basically Transformers.
Robots
in which robots hit each other. The interesting thing about it is this. I mean, Shane Black is an interesting choice. I mean, he made his name as a screenwriter doing the Lethal Weapon movies. He worked with Robert Downey Jr. before on Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. And the thing that he was known for was, for making millions of dollars for writing screenplays that had really sharp, sassy, rude one-liners in them, and he has got a really, really good ear for that. The line, which I'm glad you didn't actually say, the problem, because there's nothing worse than, there's a great line in a movie, let's spoil it for everybody by saying it, but you're right, it does have those kind of things, and that line is very funny. But one of the great joys of it is Robert Downey Jr. is really well suited to do this kind of fast-talking, snappy, slightly snarky, very self-confident, right? He does that really well. In fact, funnily enough, he reminded me in places of the latter stage Blackadder. Remember in the beginning of Blackadder, he was sort of creepy and didn't work, and then they kind of said, okay, well, let's redo it as that he's cleverer and smarter and funnier and nastier than everybody else. And there is a little bit of that in Iron Man. I think that stuff works rather well. The film romps along. I mean, it's a very pleasant watch. The colour scheme is somewhere between, on the one hand, you've got the darkness of The Dark Knight, which is all sort of very gothic and very doom-laden. On the other hand, you've got Fantastic Four, which appears to be, sort of brightly lit up like a Christmas tree. And this is somewhere in the middle. And the tone of it is similarly somewhere in the middle. It's zip, zang, boom, crashing along, and all this stuff is happening. And it's not taking itself too seriously. But on the other, I mean, it was very funny when she said, this is more realistic. It's more about the real world. You think, I'm sorry, Gwyneth, which real world do you live in if the world of Tony Stark in Iron Man 3 even vaguely resembles the real world? And that's the moment at which you think you do need to spend less time on the Goop website, and that, I think, goes for you as well.
No, I enjoyed it.
In the end,
I almost bought some pastel
I don't want to
trousers.
know. In the end, what happens with Iron Man 3 is that the last half an hour does turn. Thank you. The last half an hour does turn into Transformers, in which it is robots hitting each other. But the interesting thing is this: I didn't find that. I mean, that last half hour, it is overlong, and it does go on a little bit, and obviously because it's robots, it's a slightly different thing. But it was nothing like as headbangingly unpleasant as the Transformers movies. And the reason is that tonally, in the same way that the remake of Evil Dead is more yuck than yikes, tonally, the Transformers sequence in this is more way than war. There is a sense of, okay, fine, it's still, it's comic book fun with none of that sort of awful throttling leeriness that Michael Bay brings to anything. So, yes, overlong, and yes, the last half an hour does bag out. But for the stuff with Robert Downey Jr. doing essentially the modern day Blackadder, but with all the fantastic gadgets, works really well. Shane Black has done a good job of doing those kind of zip, zang, boom, piercing one-liners and making them all work really nicely. And I enjoyed myself. And you should stay to. Did you stay to the very end of the credits? Because there's a gaggy thing at the very, very end of the credits, like all credits nowadays, go on for about 4 days. But it is worth staying for the very, very end.
I'm not sure that I did, actually.
So you missed the bit then.
I think I probably did. Should I go and see it again?
I don't know. I don't think it's not that good.
Okay. I suspect I probably will be on a little family outing.
Okay, fine. In that case, just stay till the ending.
Okay.